Hey guys, this is Ms. Schulich. I'm sorry I can't be with y'all in person to learn today, but I wanted to make sure that I'm still helping you with your learning through this video. So it's very important that y'all follow along. You add your notes to your composition book using the note papers that the sub is going to pass out to you, and you still try to get as much out of this lesson as possible. So in elementary school, you might have learned about author's purpose, and when they taught you about author's purpose in elementary school, they did a surface level introduction of it, saying that the author's purpose is either to persuade, inform, or entertain. However, when we talk about author's purpose in middle school, we have to dive deeper. We can't just identify whether the author is persuading us to do or believe something, or informing us about something, or just entertaining us. We have to say, why did they write this? What was the greater reason? What is their message behind this article, story, poem, infographic? So we have to dig deeper. So when we talk about author's purpose, we are no longer just talking about pie, persuade, inform, or entertain. Okay? Yes, it's important to be able to identify those, but we will be diving deeper. So you should have a page that looks like this that the sub passed out to you. You will be cutting this out and gluing it in your composition book. And under table of contents, you need to put author's purpose slash message. Okay? So when we talk about author's purpose and message, we're talking about the reason the author is writing. So just like an architect designs a building to fit a specific purpose, an author also builds his or her text with a purpose in mind, or a goal in mind. Okay? So go ahead and you're going to be filling out these notes with me. So why was this written? Well, we need to start with the central idea of the text. So go ahead and we're going to add those notes right. You should have that you need to start with the central idea of the text. What is the text about? Okay, we learned about this with key idea. We need to know what is the central idea, what is the main thing that the author is writing about. Okay? And then we need to ask ourselves, what did the author want you to think, feel, know, or learn from reading this? So we need to go ahead and add those notes. So you should now have those notes like I have them on my screen. And so we should have two questions already to ask ourselves for why was the text written. Start with the central idea of the text. What's it all about? Then we need to ask ourselves, what did the author want me, or you, the reader, to think, feel, know, or learn from reading this text? After that, there's some more questions that can help you answer that larger question of what they want us to think, feel, know, or learn. These questions will help us answer that. Is it a story with a strong theme or moral? This is a lesson learned. Is it a non-fiction text that explains a topic to me? So they're informing us about a specific topic. Was the author trying to persuade me to think a certain way or take a certain action? So if they're trying to convince me to do something, what are they trying to convince me to do? If they're trying to convince me to believe something, what are they trying to convince me to believe? Was the author teaching me how to do something? Okay, well, what were they teaching me how to do? And you can also ask yourself, why would they think that I need to know how to do this? And then, is this a fun story or poem meant to entertain me? Okay, so what was the last question you can ask yourself is, what was the author trying to accomplish by writing this? Guys, now we're going to put this into practice by reading a story and filling out some notes in a graphic organizer. So first, before we do that, I want us to look right here at what an author's purpose is, kind of how they're trying to make us remember that. It says, just like an architect designs a building to fit its purpose, an author also builds his or her text with a purpose in mind. So we have a graphic organizer of a house, and we're going to fill out this house. We're going to build it in order to discover the author's purpose. Okay, so we're going to read this story. We're going to come back, fill out some of these notes on this house, and you need to follow along, fill it out in your notes, because we're going to do this one together, but then you're going to be responsible for doing some with your groups and on your own as well. So guys, go ahead and on the roof of this house, you're going to actually write it in the blank, but I can't slant my text, so I had to write it above. You're going to write the title of the story is called The Great Kapok Tree, and it's by our author, Lynn Cherry. So you're going to write the Great Kapok Tree right here, and then you're going to put Lynn Cherry right here as the author. And now this author might sound familiar to you. We read a story by her already. The story of River Ran Wild was also by Lynn Cherry. So go ahead and make sure you add the title and the author's name before we get started reading this. I'm going to have the book read to us now. I'll be pausing at times to go back to our graphic organizer and fill things out. So go ahead and listen carefully and follow along as this story is read.
The Great Kapok Tree, written by Lynn Cherry. Two men walked into the rainforest. Moments before, the forest had been alive with the sounds of squawking birds and howling monkeys. Now all was quiet, as the creatures watched the two men and wondered why they had come. The larger man stopped and pointed to a great kapok tree. Then he left. The smaller man took the axe he carried and struck the trunk of the tree. Whack! 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 The sounds of the blows rang through the forest. The wood of the tree was very hard. Chop! 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 The man wiped off the sweat that ran down his face and neck. Whack! Chop! Whack! Chop! Soon the man grew tired. He sat down to rest at the foot of the great kapok tree. Before he knew it, the heat and hum of the forest had lulled him to sleep. A boa constrictor lived in the kapok tree. He slithered down its trunk to where the man was sleeping. He looked at the gash the axe had made in the tree. Then the huge snake slid very close to the man and hissed in his ear. "Senor, this tree is a tree of miracles. It is my home, where generations of my ancestors have lived. Do not chop it down." A bee buzzed in the sleeping man's ear. "Senor, my hive is in this kapok tree, and I fly from tree to tree and flower to flower collecting pollen. In this way, I pollinate the trees and flowers throughout the rainforest. You see, all living things depend on one another." A troop of monkeys scampered down from the canopy of the kapok tree. They chatted to the sleeping man. "Senor, we have seen the ways of man. You chop down one tree, then come back for another and another. The roots of these great trees will wither and die, and there will be nothing left to hold the earth in place. When the heavy rains come, the soil will be washed away, and the forest will become a desert." A toucan, a macaw, and a cock of the rock flew down from the canopy. "Senor," squawked the toucan, "you must not cut down this tree. We have flown over the rainforest and seen what happens once you begin to chop down the trees. Many people settle on the land. They set fires to clear the underbrush, and soon the forest disappears. Where once there was life and beauty, only black and smouldering ruins remain." A bright and small tree frog crawled along the edge of a leaf. In a squeaky voice, he piped in the man's ear. "Senor, a ruined rainforest means ruined lives, many ruined lives. You will leave many of us homeless if you chop down this great kapok tree." A jaguar had been sleeping along a branch in the middle of the tree. Because his spotted coat blended into the dappled light and shadows of the understory, no one had noticed him. Now he leapt down and padded silently over to the sleeping man. He growled in his ear, "Senor, the kapok tree is home to many birds and animals. If you cut it down, where will I find my dinner?" 4 tree porcupines swung down from branch to branch and whispered to the man, "Senor, do you know what we animals and humans need in order to live? Oxygen. And, Senor, do you know what trees produce? Oxygen. If you cut down the forests, you will destroy that which gives us all life. Several anteaters climbed down the kapok tree with their young clinging to their backs. The unstriped anteater said to the sleeping man, Senor, you are chopping down this tree with no thought for the future, and surely you know that what happens tomorrow depends upon what you do today. The big man tells you to chop down a beautiful tree. He does not think of his own children, who tomorrow must live in a world without trees. A three-toed sloth had begun climbing down from the canopy when the men first appeared. Only now did she reach the ground. Plodding ever so slowly over to the sleeping man, she spoke in her deep and lazy voice. Senor, how much is beauty worth? Can you live without it? If you destroy the beauty of the rainforest, on what would you feast your eyes? A child from the Yanomamo tribe, who lived in the rainforest, knelt over the sleeping man. He murmured in his ear, Senor, when you awake, please look upon us all with new eyes. The man awoke with a start. Before him stood the rainforest child, and all around him, staring, were the creatures who depended upon the great kapok tree. What wondrous and rare animals they were! The man looked about and saw the sun streaming through the canopy. Spots of bright light glowed like jewels amidst the dark green forest. Strange and beautiful plants seemed to dangle in the air, suspended from the great kapok tree. The man smelled the fragrant perfume of their flowers. He felt the steamy mist rising from the forest floor, but he heard no sound, for the creatures were strangely silent. The man stood and picked up his axe. He swung back his arm as though to strike the tree. Suddenly he stopped. He turned and looked at the animals and the child.
So there is two more pages to this story, and it shows you on the same slide. I only want y'all to hear the second to last page before we read the last page together. So the second to last page says, he hesitated, then dropped the axe and walked out of the rainforest. Now, before we read the very last page where the author is going to reveal her purpose, I want to see if we can figure out the author's purpose or message without looking at that very last page where she writes a letter to us readers. Okay, so this first part of the house, how does the author's use of language and literary devices contribute to the purpose? We haven't covered that yet, so I'm not going to focus on that. But if you remember this from your past years of school, you can add to that section, okay? But what I do want us to look at is this next part. How does the author's use of print and graphic features contribute to the purpose? Before our story even starts, Lynn Cherry includes some really cool graphic features in the beginning of her story. So she has a map, and you'll see on the map there's dark green, and then there's light green. And if you look at this key right here, it says the dark green is where the rainforests are today, and the light green shows how far they used to stretch. Okay? So the dark green is the rainforest today, the light green is how far they used to stretch. We also have the layers of the rainforest. So rainforest goes up vertically. You have some lower layers, and then it goes all the way up into the canopies at the very top of the trees. And then we also have the author included all of these animals around here for us. So why do you think the author would have included these print or graphic features in this part of the story before we even get into the story? So what I want you to do is I want you to pause this video. I want you to think about it, maybe talk about it with your friends, your peers, before we answer that together. So hopefully you were able to talk about this with your groups and you came up with some similar things, but I just want to, since I'm not there to hear your thoughts and ideas, go ahead and put what I was thinking while I was looking at these things. So how does the author's use of print and graphic features contribute to the purpose? The author uses the map to show how the rainforests are decreasing over time. The animals around the map and on the levels of the rainforest show that the rainforest is an important home to many animals. Okay, so if you already had something like this, don't erase everything, keep it. If you didn't have anything like this, then you might need to make some adjustments. And I want us to talk a little bit about how the text structure contributes to the author's purpose. So we haven't talked about text structure yet this year, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you what the text structure is. The text structure is sequential order, where the author is presenting events in the order that they happen. Now we're just looking at a very brief amount of time in this story, but let's talk about what is the first event that happens in this story. Go ahead and pause, think about that for a minute. Maybe talk to your group. Okay, so the first event that happens in the story is there's a man and he takes another man out into the rainforest and he looks at this great kapok tree and says, you need to cut it down. The man starts cutting down the tree per his boss's instructions, and then he gets tired and falls asleep. What happens next is the most important thing that happens in this story, is what happens in his dream. Okay, so in his dream, we have all these animals coming and telling him why the tree is important to them. And then we have a child coming and telling him why the tree is important to him. Okay, so why does the author present all of these different animals? Why doesn't he just have one animal come and talk to the man? Why do we have the sequence of all these different animals coming and talking to the man? So think about that. Pause the video and talk about that with your group for a second. Okay, I hope that you got something along the lines of the author is presenting all these different animals in order, one after the next, in order to show how many animals live in this tree, live in the rainforest, and rely on the rainforest. So that's why the author includes so many back-to-back in sequence. Additionally, guys, the author has the beginning of the story starting with a man cutting down the tree, and at the end of the story with the man leaving the tree. And this is to show, he shows these events in order to show us that the author uses sequential order to show how the man changes in the story. First, at the beginning of the story, he is cutting down the trees. Then the animals are talking to him in his dream. This is happening sequentially, like we said. He does one after another to show us how many animals rely on the rainforest, and then he leaves it alone. Okay? So the author uses that sequential order, that time passing, to show how the man's perspective changes and how his beliefs change. Okay, so go ahead and make sure you have something like this written down in your notes, because this is going to help you out a lot. Now let's talk about the intended audience of this book. Let's go ahead and put our information for that. So this is a storybook, and the intended audience for storybooks are usually, go ahead and pause and think about this, children. Okay, so the audience for this book is children. But who usually also reads children's books to children? Okay, think about that for a second, maybe pause. So maybe you included something like children, parents, and teachers are the intended audience, which would all be really good intended audiences for this story because it is a children's book. And that also goes and leads into genre. This is a children's story. It's a children's book, so the genre would be fiction. So make sure you have something along those lines. So now we're getting really close to figuring out the author's central idea and the author's message. So let's reflect back on what was happening in the story again. We have a man, he goes in, he's cutting down a tree in the rainforest. Then he falls asleep and has a dream where all these rainforest animals come and talk to him. Following that dream, he is about to cut down the tree again, but he remembers them, or he actually sees them. Now we don't know if he's imagining them or actually really seeing them. And he goes away and he stops cutting down the tree. So what do we think that the central idea of this story is? Now also, remember back to our graphic features. Remember back to the graphic features at the beginning of the story, and we talked about how the rainforests are decreasing and all these animals are relying on it. Those should help us come up with the central idea. Go ahead and pause the video, talk about this with your group, try to write what the central idea, key idea of this story is, and then I'll kind of give y'all some insight. I'm sure y'all came up with some really good ideas with your group, and I bet that y'all are on the right track, but let's go ahead and talk about it. So what I got from this with the central idea is that the author is talking about preserving the rainforest or saving the rainforest for the animals and people who live there. Now go ahead and raise your hand if you live near the rainforest. Okay, nobody should have their hands up. We all live in Texas, which is far from the Amazon rainforest. However, we did figure that this intended audience of this book is children, parents, and teachers, and this book was not just written for people who live in the rainforest or near the rainforest. So what is the author's purpose or message? What are they trying to teach us? What are they trying to get us to know or learn from this story? Okay, so they are trying to get us to learn about saving the rainforest, but is it just about saving the rainforest? Because we're not near there and there's not a big impact we personally might have on the rainforest. So think about, how is this a message for you? Go ahead and pause and think. Okay, I know y'all are probably getting some good ideas with your groups, but I do think that this is a good message for all of us, that we need to be part of not only preserving, we don't only need to think about preserving the rainforest, but we need to think about preserving nature for the animals and people who live around it, and that's the nature that is around us too. So I went ahead and kind of summarized what I was talking about. The author's purpose / message is to show people that they should think about what they can do to preserve the rainforest, but not only the rainforest, and nature near them for the people and animals who depend upon it and enjoy it. And there's text evidence throughout this story that supports that. We're going to go and hit on a couple things of text evidence that supports that purpose real quick. So here we have the snake, and he's explaining to the man that this is his home and his ancestors have lived there for generations, and if he chops it down, he will be without a home, and so will the snake's future children. Okay, here we see that the flowers grow on the trees, and the butterflies are telling the man that they pollinate the trees and the flowers, and so if they cut down the tree, the rest of the rainforest depends on that tree for pollination. So another place that the author is showing that the animals depend on it. Okay, here we see that the leopard says that this is where many animals live, and if we get rid of it, there goes his dinner, which is really important for his survival. Okay, here these cute little tree porcupines are explaining to him that the trees produce oxygen, and we all need oxygen to live. So if we start destroying nature, we're getting rid of a good oxygen source for animals as well as us. More text evidence is on this page. The anteaters tell him that the big man tells you to chop down a beautiful tree. He does not think of his own children, who tomorrow must live in a world without trees. So that's also showing the importance of preserving nature, as we have to think about how it affects others in the future. So now I'm going to take y'all to the very last page of the story, like I said I would, and we're going to read the note that the author includes for the readers at the end, and it reveals her purpose in writing this story. And we're going to confirm and see if we were right as far as her purpose goes.
Dear readers, I wrote The Great Kapok Tree to let the world know what happens to the rainforest creatures and to the entire planet when rainforests are destroyed. I hope that after reading this book, you will help save the rainforests. The Great Kapok Tree is about the Amazon rainforest, a tropical rainforest, but we have a temperate rainforest in the Pacific Northwest of the United States that we must protect too. Please care for Mother Earth. Together, we can make a difference. Lynn Cherry.
So right there, the author confirms our prediction, guys. So y'all did a really good job of going through that. I know it's hard without me being there, but I really want you to take away that it's important to look at all these things and build our house in order to discover the author's purpose. So what I need you to do now is I need you to make sure you have cut out all of our notes for today. So you're going to cut around this first note sheet, cut around that dark black line, glue that in your composition book. That'll take up one page. And then on another page, go ahead and cut out this part right here where it says author's purpose. Cut out this part where it says I will explain the author's purpose and message within a text. And cut out the house and glue that into your composition book. Now, if you've finished and there's plenty of time left before the bell rings, you may color and decorate your house in your composition book to finish out those notes. But make sure you have all of this important information, important notes, because you will be building the author's purpose house on your own probably tomorrow. So make sure that you have all that good stuff, and I miss you guys, and I hope you are doing well.